Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about the ingress of Venus into sign of Aries, as well as all the conjunction and aspects that it will be making in the next couple of weeks. Venus is going to come into a conjunction with Neptune, and then Saturn, sextile Pluto, and then square Jupiter. And if you think about it, we're talking about a big shift with Venus because Venus is going from the sign of its exaltation into a sign where it's at its exile. And that's because the sign of Aries is opposing Venus's own sign, which is a sign of Libra. And the intensity of this Venus with all the transits is going to be about a couple of weeks. And I always think about Venus coming out of Pisces and going into the sign of Aries. It's like this beautiful, moist, wet Venus coming out of the ocean, and then right away is stepping into the inferno. And Venus in Aries can be very turbulent just by itself, let alone the fact that it's going to meet Neptune and then Saturn. But if we pay attention, this transit, like all transit, is teaching us something about our narrative, where we're at in life. And specifically this sequence is showing us how we initiate love, how we respond to rejections, and then what about our thinking process that gets evoked or triggered into place. And ultimately, this movement of Venus is trying to show us what we really truly hold in our hearts, what we need, what we desire, and how we should go about getting it. And before moving on to the rest of the video, I just want to let you know that there'll be plenty of videos coming about transits in March. There's a lot happening. So if you want to catch those videos, please remember to subscribe and press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you. And also, there's a 2 or 3 part series videos about Venus just in the sign of Aries. I get into the depth of what this placement means. And if you guys want to watch that video, I'll link it in the description box below. One more thing before I move on. So I've received a lot of emails and messages, being an Iranian, people wanting to know, where do I stand with this? And to be honest with you, it does feel like the big elephant in the room. But the way that I see it, I use this platform for self-knowledge, talking about astrology. So it's hard for me to bring that in seamlessly and talk about it. And on top of that, I'll be talking about a mere opinion of mine. I have tried my best to educate myself on the history, geopolitics, and issues that pertains to my country of origin, Iran. But I would not consider myself an expert to be sitting here and talking about it. I could do the chart of Iran and approach it from that direction. But the only thing that I'm going to say right now is that I don't have a black and white view of good guys and bad guys. And in my mind, there's a distinct differentiation between those in the position of power and why they do what they do, and for us on the ground as civilians living our lives. And I do know this. I've lived through 6 years of bombing in Iran when there was that Iraq-Iran war going on. And from that perspective, my heart goes out to all the human beings on the ground who are losing their loved ones on all sides. The way that comes to scar you and everything else that it means in terms of everyday living, poverty, negotiating with scarcity, fear, absolute fear, is unbelievable. So the only thing I want to say is that I want integrity of life. And I wish for us human beings to reach our highest potential in terms of our humanity. And I'm going to leave it at that. Let's get right into the video. And I want to start here, going back to the fact that Venus is now making that transition from Pisces to Aries. And we got to remember where Saturn was sitting for the past 3 years, which was the sign of Pisces. So every time Venus went through the sign of Pisces, it was meeting Saturn. And love, those Venetian qualities in the sign of Pisces are not casual. I talk about that extensively in the previous video about exaltation of Venus. In the sign of Pisces, love runs deep. But with Saturn there, for 3 years, that love was continuously being tested. It was testing our endurance of what it is that we love in this life. Like with Venus there, this concept of devotion that's related to Venus in that sign, it became a very heavy topic. And at the same time, all kinds of boundaries were being blurred. So it was even hard to know what we were devoted to. But now that atmosphere shifts. Now, for the next 2 years, Venus is going to meet Saturn every time it goes in through the sign of Aries, and it's going to be for a total of 3 times. So the temperature has completely changed, even though we're talking about the same conjunction. And we have to remember this conjunction is occurring with a Venus that is in exile and with a Saturn that's debilitated. So we're not talking about easy love or easy Venetian concepts. And we also have to remember both Saturn and Venus don't function the way Aries does. Aries has a certain demand of these 2 planets that you're supposed to act in these Aries kind of ways. Neither Saturn nor Venus are initiative, asserting, motivated, determined, but this is what's expected of them in the sign of Aries. For example, that Venus-Saturn in the sign of Pisces, it was asking the Venus within us, how much can you hold and for how long? But with this Venus and Saturn now in Aries, it's a question of who are you when you stop merging with other people and you are your own individual self. So this is no longer about endurance and devotion. This conjunction is creating a kind of a friction at the core of our identity. And I really had to get this difference between the conjunction of Venus and Saturn in Pisces versus in Aries, because it's a huge difference. But let's go into that first conjunction, the ingress of Venus and that first conjunction with Neptune at 1 degrees of Aries. So this is kind of like that initial image that I was talking about at the beginning. Venus is coming out of the sign of Pisces, is nice, moist, receptive, but its vision is still a little blurry, you know, when you have a little bit of water in your eyes. So as soon as Venus enters into the sign of Aries, it doesn't even know what has hit it yet because Neptune has that quality. Neptune keeps us in that state of blurry vision for a little bit. It's like our perception has not yet adjusted to the inferno that we're standing in. We're feeling the heat, but at that initial point, it hasn't sunk in yet. So this initial meeting with Neptune can actually bring very strong feelings of longing. Suddenly it can have a vision about the kind of love it wants or those Venetian qualities, a big inspirational vision. And naturally this can induce fantasies coming up to the surface of who I want to be in love, what my desires should feel like, how my desires should be met. And if you pay attention, it's now the we of the Pisces is turning into me. And there can be another feeling too when Venus steps into the sign of Aries. There can be the sense of I want a new start. There can be a belief that I can just start something new, very clean, just from the beginning. But we have to remember we're talking about Neptune here. It's always blurring the edges, is blurring that differentiation that exists between me and you. It doesn't know where it begins and ends. So it can allow the projections that we have inside of our head to move far past reality. And we have to remember this is happening at that critical 1 degree of Aries. So there's this raw emergence for this feeling of I am, that I need to declare myself, that I have come into existence. I exist and I have needs. There's a way that I need to be loved. And what Neptune is doing here is turning all those questions that we have related to how we want to connect, is turning it into a self-referential question, such as how do I get what I want? How do I move towards it? How do I make it happen for myself? And if you pay attention at the get-go, this is in contradiction to Venus's receptive feminine quality, which can actually stand very passively, but have this enormous power of attraction. This Venus is becoming a go-getter and it's making itself the central reference point. And we have to remember Neptune is fusing our ideals into our desires for others and how we desire and wish to connect with them. And because Neptune's so new here, we don't have a stabilized sense of identity around these dreams and these visions that we have. So every planet that comes to transit now, and Venus being the first one, we're kind of learning what this means now. Right now, we have a lot of visions about where we want to be, but none of them have been tested against reality right now. Venus is our first reality test. And we have to remember when Venus makes this connection, again, because Neptune smooths out the edges, right now, everything that we're feeling, those Venetian thoughts and feelings, everything feels possible. So this is the Venus within us moving forward with some degree of illusions. This Venus doesn't yet know where illusions end and where a true sense of agency have to come to the forefront. And of course, this is going to come to an abrupt end because right away after this conjunction with Neptune, Venus is going to connect with Saturn. So we hit that proverbial hard wall of reality right away. And that happens on the next day on March 7th. And as I mentioned earlier, Saturn's debilitated in Aries. Aries wants immediate actions, decisive decision making in the now, while Saturn is slow. Saturn's about delay, being very cautious, even being fearful. Aries is telling Saturn, initiate now, say yes, do it now. And Saturn's like, no, I gotta put on some restraints. I can't just move freely. So Aries is accelerating things, Saturn slowing things down. Aries declares, and then Saturn doubts every declaration. It's really a situation of stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. You just don't end up going anywhere. You just make donuts, go around in a circle. So Saturn in Aries creates a feeling of obstruction, or initiative feels stalled. It's hard to have a sense of self-confidence in the sign of Aries with Saturn because there's always this hesitation in the background. And not to mention Saturn in Aries, one of the things that it does, it creates a lot of feelings of rejection. Whether if we're really being rejected by other people or we just have that sense of being rejected by existence itself. So it's hard to have an authentic self-expression with confidence. And the result of all this is usually false ignition or it's frustration in terms of starting things. Now, think back to Venus, thinking it can have new love, it can have new beginnings. It just made that connection with Neptune. And we got to remember Venus represents receptivity and our relational harmony. So one of the things that will happen right away when Venus comes into that conjunction, we encounter resistance. Rather than being welcome for who we are and what we just declared that we want, there's a feeling of rejection of those things. This is Venus now walking into an atmosphere of no, from yes of Neptune to no of Saturn. So it really hits hard. And some of the outcome of this is that we'll feel that affection is just not there, or it's being withheld, or we're withholding it from someone else. Softness and vulnerability can feel like it's being scrutinized. This is like you showing your emotion to someone and someone's like, oh my God, you're just too much. Stop it. So that voluptuousness of Venus is being met by coolness and dryness of Saturn. And it almost feels like we're constantly being pushed to prove that we have a sense of self-worth, the things that I desire are worthy. It becomes hard to express it confidently. So Saturn is very anticlimactic for Venus in the sign of Aries. And you know what? Venus and Saturn are actually friends. They can work together very constructively. Sorry, guys, I just twisted my foot. They can work together very constructively. But this is a debilitated and a frustrated Saturn with a frustrated Venus in exile. This is like that couple that they love each other, but they're both going through a really hard time at work. So by the time they come home, they can't even have a civil discussion about what happened to them. It turns out to be a fight over a teacup, or one person just goes to one room and the other person to the other room, and then there's just silence. And we got to also remember that dryness that Saturn brings, Saturn's vata, is related to dry air. Air dries things out. In the sign of Aries, it's also heated. So this is like being stuck in the desert, dehydrated, getting no nourishment. That's where that feeling of rejection's coming from, this combination. And because we're not getting what we want, it can lead to overextension of proving ourselves, proving that our desire is worthy, all of it, which can turn into exhaustion. And putting Saturn in the sign of Aries by itself brings out exhaustion in general. It's almost as if we're trying so hard to initiate some sort of warmth. And yet the environments that we find ourselves is unresponsive. There's no one there to receive it, or there might be someone who receives it but does not want to reciprocate. So this conjunction is talking about a very frustrated love and the Venetian qualities that want to express themselves. And because of it, we can get a lot of Venus's shadows expressing themselves with this conjunction. And I want to talk about that briefly. So in general, one of the shadows of Venus in the sign of Aries, because it is in its exile, and because Aries has given Venus that script that you can only express yourself through self-assertion, Venus feels hindered. The Venus within us to operate through cooperation and accommodation. So this Venus within us can become very impatient, very reactive. It can become even exclusionary rather than inclusionary. And we also have to remember this debilitated Saturn is taking our reactivity and it's meeting it with internalized doubt. So this is an expression of being very hot and cold with someone else. So we can initiate connection and then withdraw, or our partners can do that with us. We have a project, some project related to, let's say, arts. We want to initiate it, we're all in, and then it's like totally cold, zero determination to follow through. We'll withdraw. And the only thing that will propel this Venus, this is why it's a shadow, it needs constant, instant gratification or some sort of an applause to move forward because its own reason, it can't be confident in it. There's a lot of doubts. For example, this Venus can equate love with approval. It can feel super rejected by just minor utterances by other people. We can become very confrontational with our significant other, as an example, which is our defense against feeling unwanted. Because Saturn got that cold, distance, detached thing happening too. For other people, because this is a sign of Aries, you can get this feeling of wanting to dominate the other person. And all of that is to avoid the vulnerability that Saturn's causing here. And all of this turns out to be some sort of a passive-aggressive behavior, which is ultimately about manipulating other people. This is why it's a shadow, is to get what you want, but not in a direct way. In general, love becomes very conditional under these conditions. It becomes measured, things about tit for tat. It can become about constant endurance of some crap or the denial that we're even doing anything. That mutual understanding, reciprocity, and exchange of Venus is very much being messed with here in the sign of Aries and with Saturn present. And in general, Aries is self-oriented. Saturn got that cool, distant ways about it. So having a sense of warmth through this 2 weeks, it can feel absent. I think one way to also stay conscious of this is to understand if we're acting from a place of pride, or is this actually related to how we need to feel affectionate, how we need to receive affection? Are we punishing other people because we're not getting what we want? So to understand the shadow of Venus here, we have to understand if we're initiating the ways that we're behaving from a place of self-knowledge, or is it from fear of invisibility? Is it our pride that wants love, or is it our heart that wants love? So this is where I'm going to stop talking about Saturn and Venus, but we're far from done. Because after this lovely whiplash, Venus makes a sextile to Aquarius. And the planet in Aquarius is Pluto, which is introducing a different set of problems, but is the way to deal with that Saturn problem. And this occurs on March 9th. And we have to remember anything that goes through the sign of Aquarius is operating through the intellect. This is a super cerebral, even an abstract sign in that way. It does not deal with emotions. So this is a Pluto that's operating from the premise of the intellect. This is a Pluto that reorganizes how we perceive and calculate things. It is attaching all of our emotion to this cerebral calculation. Do you guys remember that cartoon, Pinky and the Brain? Pluto is like the brain in this situation. And of course, Pluto is always exposing our subconscious content that are dark and are uncomfortable. So after Venus has been slowed down, rejected, and hardened by Saturn, Venus at this 4-degree mark is tempted to shift from the matters of the heart to the mind. And that means we're going to try, or the people that we love around us are going to try to regain control through their intellectual and mental repositioning. This is a time that we're going to start doing mental gymnastics and hyper-analyzing our partners and the people that we love, the projects that we love that we're engaged with, instead of being involved and being engaged and having some emotion and heart in it, we're just hyper-focused mentally. And this is going to become a great way to rationalize and to justify the distance, the coldness, the rejection. We can get to a mode of arguing with other people as to why we're justified to behave or to react the ways that we've been. This is a moment of ego redemption. We're getting a surge of power to enact our desires and what it is we need, what I need, where I stand. This is us attempting not to feel vulnerable the way Saturn made us feel vulnerable. So it's changing our power dynamic and how we're positioned relative and in relation to other people. And considering Venus is in the sign of Aries, there's this urge that I need to assert myself. And since this is a sextile, Pluto's trying to help Venus to do this. But we always have to keep in mind, which planet is helping us? It's Pluto, the god of darkness and the underworld. And if you use cognition to manage vulnerability, one of the things that happens is that we have to become even colder than our opponents. And I say this is actually going to be super cold, almost to a point of indifference to destroy someone else, because who's the ruler of Aquarius? It's Saturn, and Saturn is debilitated, and Venus is so close to Saturn. So the Venus in us might think I found a solution, but it's just amping up this Plutonian, Saturnine way of dealing with other people. We have to be super conscious of this. And I say that because instead of being present with that partner that we just departed and fought over the teacup, instead of getting back together and talking it out and hearing the other person's perspective, this is now a Venus that wants to show conceptual superiority of why it's in the right and why the other person's in the wrong. And we have to understand all of this is already coming from a wounded Venus because of that meeting with Saturn and because of being in the sign of Aries. And this wounded part of us wants to reposition itself through very sharp reasoning. But in reality, it's a power play. We just have to realize that. But because this is a sextile, if we have the awareness, we can see that Pluto is also giving us a transformative power here, but only if we're willing to test and examine our own motives. And I think one way to do that is that when that feeling comes over that I need to have supremacy over you in this moment, is to ask ourselves, well, what's the motive behind this intellectual dominance? Why do I need it? What am I trying to achieve? What's going to be the outcome of this? Like a question to ask is to pause for a moment. Saturn in Aries can create pauses, which is great for this. Is to pause and say, am I seeing this correctly? What am I exactly seeing? And as a response, am I just trying to protect myself at all costs and it might cost me everything? So we just have to have a sense of awareness with this. And it's actually giving us some sort of a fuel to overcome this resistance and slowing down of Saturn so it can work for us. But again, we're not done because the next aspect is a square with Jupiter. And we know square is a harder kind of an aspect to deal with. There's always some sort of a confrontation that we have to deal with. And this square happens on March 18th. So now we've talked about a Venus that has gone through the process of idealization, resistance, intellectual reassertion, and it's been sitting in that fire for about a week until it comes into that square with Jupiter at 15 degrees. And this Jupiter is now direct. I will be making a video about what this Jupiter going direct is all about. But for now, I just want us to focus on the fact that Jupiter in the sign of Cancer expands our emotional truth. It augments our need for attachment and wanting to have a sense of belonging, protection. It's showing us the depth of our needs in the way that we want to actually be held with someone, which is so different than what Venus and Aries can do. Venus and Aries can be like, I don't need anybody. I'm good on my own. I'm better on my own. I know how to love myself when I'm on my own. Now Jupiter's coming in and he's like, are you sure you don't want to be held? Are you sure you don't want to be loved? So this Jupiter is not showing some sort of an excess, but it's a kind of a revelation about the truth of our heart and how it's at such a contradiction with our reality and how we're behaving. And if we think about it, this Venus, before it reaches Jupiter, it has already tried the several strategies. It has tried to initiate forcefully with that big vision with Neptune. It has gone cold and detached. It has withdrawn because of its pride. It has analyzed the crap out of everything instead of feeling anything. And it might have heartened at this point by all the rejection that it was keep getting. But Jupiter is doing something very deep right now. It's showing how we are a participant in these kinds of modes and modalities and what is actually the underlying need behind all of this. So again, what's becoming visible is our discrepancies between where we are, how we're trying to assert ourselves, how we're reacting, and what it is that we actually and truly need. Jupiter is showing us how our hearts actually wants tenderness, reassurance, and emotional safety. Jupiter is showing us you really want these things, but pay attention to the methods you've been employing, like that passive aggressive thing, to be able to get it. It's showing us that our strategies don't actually match our emotional truth. We'll see that the fire of Aries wanted us to move very quickly. And then at the same time, we felt rejected by all of the slowing down that's happening with Saturn. And Pluto just set us into this, I'm going to fight back with you. I'm going to show you why I'm right. And now Jupiter's coming in and is like, is this really the best way to pursue love? Is this how you want to go about it? What you're doing, is it actually aligned to what you need? So this square is actually magnifying our own misalignments in terms of how we feel and how we act. And because of this aspect, we might have a sudden realization. Like Venus in the sign of Aries can become very independent. So there can be this moment of, oh my God, I don't want all of this independence. The independence actually doesn't create a sense of feeling soothed. Like I don't, it's not soothing to me. It's not pleasing. Or we might have the realization that, oh my God, I'm exerting so much control. But this is the antithesis of what I want, which is to actually have a sense of closeness and to be connected to someone or something. Or we'll realize that this pride to protect ourselves is not at all nourishing our hearts. We're keeping face, but we're falling apart underneath it. And this is an amazing realization to have, but a difficult one because we just messed up a whole bunch of things, or other people around us might have messed up a bunch of things. And it's uncomfortable because it's revealing the immaturity in our dynamics. So Jupiter's showing us that, hey, your desires are valid, but whatever that it is that you want is valid, but its execution is not. It's showing us that our execution is exclusionary rather than inclusionary. And because of it, we're not getting our desires met. We feel unhinged and uneasy. And I want you to keep something else in mind. I've done a long video about Jupiter in the nakshatra of Punarvasu. And this nakshatra has a lot to do with redoing things, not to start things new, but to take the ingredients that are in our lives and just to reuse them in a different way to create something different, something new from that. So this Jupiter is showing us, look, you have all the right ingredients in your life. It's not adding up to much. It's not going anywhere because of the way you're combining these components. Just do them, reconfigure them in a different way, behave in a different way, and you'll have a different outcome. Adjust these emotions, change these connections that you have, and you'll notice that you're acting different and your life's going somewhere different. It's just telling us, it's trying to help us to do things differently. And with that retrograde of Jupiter for the past few months, we were kind of going back in understanding that ingredients and understanding how we've been doing things and how we need to redo things. Once when this Jupiter stations direct, which I will be talking about in that next video, is about now how do we recombine the different ingredients of our life and move forward from there. But that's a video for another day. In general, Jupiter is disclosing a very difficult truth to us, which is about aligning our actions to the ways that we truly feel on the inside and things that actually meet our desires, to be proactive rather than reactive. The tension of this square is going to crystallize this for us. And I just want to take a moment to talk about what is the purpose of us having this experience? What is this transit denoting in terms of our growth trajectory? So these couple of weeks in the month of March are compressing a few relational dynamics for our maturation process, because we've moved from illusion to resistance, from resistance to power recalibration, and then from that to seeing the emotional gap between all of it. This is 2 weeks of us understanding how we embody this concept of love, how it fits in our identity, and how that identity informs our action and our connectivity to the world. And at the same time, how do we maintain our own self-integrity while we're trying to connect with other people? Like back in the sign of Pisces where Saturn was there for 3 years, Venus was going through this maturation process through constant compromise, giving things up in order to get to the essence of love, relationships, and what matters to us. Now it wants to mature through individuation. It wants us to really understand who we are in love, as love, with all the Venetian topics. In a lot of ways, we're being shown how to initiate in terms of establishing connections, how the I of ourself comes into this equation. It's about how it is that we respond to resistance, because other people have their own free will. They can say no to us. The problem is not that they said no. The problem is usually in the way that we respond to other people's no. What it means for us, what it means for that dynamic. It's also showing us how to stabilize our sense of self-worth. The sign of Aries has a lot to do with our individual self, with our sense of freedom, the who I am of me. And it's showing us what it means to have self-worth in the absence of having warmth, validation, acknowledgement because of Saturn. So in a lot of ways, it's showing us how to manage vulnerability, to be vulnerable and simultaneously maintain your strength and your integrity. For the next couple of years, every time Venus comes here, we are going to be tested regarding our standards. What is your own personal standard, your own stance? The sign of Aries has a lot to do with Dharma. And then how do you maintain that regardless of the coldness of Saturn, regardless of the power dynamics that Pluto's bringing in? And how do you assert yourself without hardening yourself and not losing that receptivity of Venus? Because that is so important for establishing relationships, any kind of a relational dynamic, not just romantic relationship, even with our work. We have to be receptive to it. We can't constantly stand against something and keep going. We'll break. It's teaching us how to be cool-headed rather than being reactive. And that means that we come to respond to things in a mature way rather than reacting to it. So in a lot of ways, this dynamic is building relational resiliency, but by showing us where we stand and how we do things in this equation. And there's a lot of self-knowledge here because we're starting to see how we react under pressure and how other people also react to us when they're under pressure. Then how do we react to them? There's this like circuit that can just become very circular and we can get trapped in it. We're starting to see what these things are. And I would say, I hope we have the wisdom here to understand one of the gifts that Saturn brings into the sign of Aries, which is our ability to pause before we react. So it's like, oh my God, here's a perceived reaction. My response is to fight. No, I'm going to pause. What does this rejection actually say about me? Is it saying something about me? What is it saying about the other person? By the time you do this, you will not react. I guarantee it. It's a moment of pause to remind ourselves that anger is present. Rejection is present. How do I want to deal with it? This is the gift that Saturn brings here. In a sense, we don't have to internalize all the feelings. When I say anger is present, I am sitting with anger. I'm having a dialogue with anger. It doesn't have to become me, nor does the coldness or any other negative emotion. And if we can handle that, we can express Venus beautifully in the sign of Aries because we know where we fit as the I of ourselves in the entire picture. And we always have to remember Venus in the sign of Aries is in its exile. So the shadows can come up very easy. The reactivity can come up very easy. So the harmony that we want to have has to be constructed very deliberately and consciously. And again, the blessing of Saturn here for the next 2 years, it can actually help us to think, feel, because we can pause. And now, before closing this video, please do remember to share, subscribe, and comment especially. I love to know how you're feeling this transition from the sign of Pisces into the sign of Aries. It is a whiplash, especially at that 29 degree and then that 1 degree of Aries. Some people are super sensitive to these Gandenta points or these critical degree shifts from the signs. If you do feel them, Let me know how you feel it. What themes are coming up for you? What are you grappling with, wrestling with? I'd love to know. And by sharing with each other, we can all learn from each other as well. And of course, if you want a reading of this transit or any other transit, or just to understand the beautiful blueprint that's been designated to you for a chart reading, you can go to parisayazdi.com for more information, or you can email me directly. My email is in the description box below. And for the articles that I write related to these transits and a lot more, you can also go to my website for that. And for the closing, I just want to express this wish for us. May this transit reveal where our love falters and where it already stands strong and steady. May we endure without closing ourselves, and may our sense of self grow strong enough to love without fear. That's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.